Every revolution starts in the minds of the people. Arm yourself for the war of ideas. Take back your life. Take back your liberty. Tom Mullen Talks Freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tom Mullen Talks Freedom. Today is Wednesday, March 18th, day 19 of the dumb Iran war, the latest dumb war waged by the empire, and maybe the dumbest of the century. Only time will tell. We're very early on here, even though Trump has had his mission accomplished moment. For those of you who remember George Bush on the aircraft carrier with the big sign, mission accomplished behind him, that was something like June or July of 2003, a few months into the 10-year, depending on how you measure it, the 10-year Iraq war, or 10 years and counting. And of course, we're told that 80 to 90% of the Iranian missile capability has been destroyed, although missiles keep hitting our bases. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Whatever those missiles are that are keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, they must be part of that 10%. And of course, we know that we don't know. We have no idea what percentage of the Iranian missile capability has been destroyed. Of course, great damage has been done with the thousands of bombs dropped on Iran, but we know that they have vast underground facilities. We've seen video of missiles being fired from underground, literally emerging from the sand. So how many of those, what percentage of their total missiles are underground and still not affected is hard to say. Of course, you have the administration, which is lying because, they're the government. That's their job. But you can't, of course, just take for granted the critics of the administration. There's very little opportunity to independently verify anybody's information. And especially in an age when you got AI videos filtering around, as I said in a previous podcast, it's like the Iran multiverse. Depending on who you talk to, it's going completely differently or being fought for a completely different reason. But there's a few things we do know. One, the Iranian regime is still intact, and that is likely to be the case unless the United States invades. And I don't know that the United States military is capable of successfully pulling off that invasion. Remember, Iran, if you look at a map that's scaled properly for Western Asia and the Mediterranean or the Middle East, Iran dwarfs Iraq in size as far as area is concerned. It's about the size of Western Europe. So I think everyone thinks of Iran as kind of just another little country next door to Iraq. It's not. It's the outline of the old Persian Empire after it was defeated by Rome, not before, when it was much more extensive. But what we do know is that in order to really successfully change a regime and bring a country under even relative control, you need boots on the ground. I mean, you need people going door to door. That's what they did in Iraq, bombing them for 10 years. Throughout the 1990s, they bombed Iraq. Basically, after the 1991 Gulf War, they bombed them until they invaded them. In 2003, there were some breaks, but for the most part, they bombed them for over a decade. And Saddam Hussein was still there, still supposedly the threat he always was, according to the empire. Of course, we found out they were lying about that there were no weapons of mass destruction. Just like Iran did not have a nuclear weapon that they would have deployed by now if the Trump administration had not launched this air war against them. For those of us who've been around for this multiple times, I mean, it really is discouraging to see how many people still just accept this crap, this slop, this bullshit, self-serving, hokey. I mean, just ridiculous shit that's peddled, cartoonish, to convince people to support or at least not oppose to fiercely this completely stupid war that has no benefit to any American who doesn't work for a defense contractor or own a lot of shares in one. So, and that aside, the fact that there's no reason to launch the war, there was no imminent threat, there will be no long-term benefit, there is no long-term gain for short-term pain. It's just pain until the pain hopefully eventually stops. But Americans will never benefit from this. If the United States just ignored the existence of Iran completely for my entire lifetime, every American would be much better off. Okay? But putting that all aside, the amateurness, the goofiness, the absolute ineptitude with which this is being handled is another subject entirely, just astonishing. I'm not going to say it makes the Biden administration look good, because I'd have to say that was also an exercise in ineptitude. And let's be honest, Biden wasn't even running the Biden administration. It was being run by the experts that advised the president that we're supposed to have all this faith in. Well, the Biden administration is what it looks like when there isn't a president saying no once in a while. And basically, on foreign policy, the Trump administration is what it looks like when even the president isn't saying no, neither to his neocon advisors nor to the prime minister of Israel. So here we are. I just want to say, for everybody sharing the Pete Hegseth clips, I want you to think of something, especially if you were around when it came out. It doesn't matter if you've seen the original Wall Street. I mean, the 1985 version, the great one, with the great Gordon Gekko as the hero and the slime snitch wannabe Bud Fox as the villain. Just picture Bud Fox at the meeting with the union guys, completely clueless that he's being played by Gekko and talking about how he's going to make the airline competitive with the majors. So go rewatch that scene if you have it handy, and then watch any Pete Hegseth press conference. You can't unsee this, I promise you. Yes, we have Bud Fox as the Secretary of War, as he's called now. So here's one thing. I mean, even the neocons for most of this century, all of this century, they've been beating the war drums against Iran since at least 2004. And maybe before that. I mean, of course, we had the bad feelings ever since the embassy was seized in 1979. I remember when that happened, by the way. And at that point, the United States had kept a dictator over the Iranian people for 26 years. That's why they were so pissed off that they took over the embassy. And these were a bunch of commie kids, hippies, kind of. Hippie Muslims, whatever, religious fanatic, hippie, Muslim, commie students. But, we keep hearing that was the beginning of the war that Iran has waged against us. No, when we overthrew their government in 1953, which is now not a matter of theory, conspiracy, or otherwise, it's a fact. It's been confirmed by CIA documents, declassified at least 10, 12 years ago, that you can go read for yourself. That's when the war started. And then 2.5 decades of having a U.S. puppet imposed on them as a ruler who ran a rather brutal secret police. Now, I always give the caveat to the whole brutal dictator narrative that let's remember who these people were oppressing, okay, including Saddam Hussein. We found out who he was oppressing. They were called ISIS and others, and a lot of Shia terrorists. So with that caveat, still none of the U.S.'s business. They basically helped out the socialist UK government get back their government-owned oil companies' assets from the socialist Mossadegh, who was democratically elected. So there were no good guys in this, and certainly none of our affair, nothing the United States should have had to pay for. And of course, it blew back on the United States when they seized our hostages, and all the hostility ever since goes back to 1953. But in this century, since the George W. Bush, also known as the Chimp administration, since he started really rattling the war saber against Iran, everybody who's talked about this for 21 to 25 years has said the same thing. The difficulty with going to war with Iran is they will close the Strait of Hormuz and they will attack all of our bases in the region where thousands of our soldiers would be at risk. Well, thousands, tens of thousands. So this should not have been a surprise. Now, Trump has come out and just said, and I can't believe he said, that they were not expecting, he says, for Iran to attack these other countries, the Gulf states. Well, they're not attacking the other countries. They may be causing collateral damage. They're attacking U.S. military bases in those countries, which are launching attacks at them. So everybody knew they were going to do that. People have talked about them doing that for decades. Even people who were disposed to be for going to war with Iran for decades have said they will attack our soldiers stationed in the region, and they will close the Strait of Hormuz, causing mass economic chaos. Now, that chaos has not materialized yet. We can see the price of oil rising, but it's early yet. It's only 18 days or 19, it's the 19th day. We know because it started on the 28th of February, so we can count off the days from memory without looking it up. And Trump, now seemingly having not had a plan for this, is trying to sell the idea that this is not the U.S.'s problem. Well, we don't even get that much oil from the Strait of Hormuz, so the other countries should go and do this. So, first of all, let's be honest with ourselves. It's not like that's the real reason. The real reason is Trump didn't he didn't ask any of the people paid to advise him on things like this who were all against this, including the Pentagon. They just went ahead and did it. And now he doesn't know what to do because he's found out, what do you mean? You mean we can't just send our ships in there and open up the Strait of Hormuz? Can't we bomb them some more? No, Mr. President, we tried to tell you that, no, it's not quite that easy. It's like that scene in Catch-22 where Orson Welles, says to take the guy, Richard Benjamin, outside and shoot him, right? And then the Weasley little son-in-law whispers in his ear something. We don't hear it. And we just hear Orson Welles saying, what? You mean I can't take him outside and shoot him? Can't I shoot anyone I want? And then the weasel pulls up the rule book and, well, get him out of my sight then. So it's almost like that, but it's not funny because, there's all kinds of lives at stake, lives that are being lost, and a nuclear war hanging out there in the background somewhere. And don't think that that's not a possibility, especially when, or if and when, Iran seems to be winning the war. And let me say, when I say winning the war, Iran is not going to go out there like on a battlefield like it's World War II and defeat the U.S. Army, if the U.S. Army was dumb enough to invade. And it's not going to shoot down U.S. planes. It's not going to get the better of the U.S. in the air or on the sea. All it has to do to win is survive. The regime has to survive, and they have to be able to keep inflicting pain. And so far, they're doing that. So in that case, so far, they're winning. I mean, think of it like the American Revolution. And, the American Revolution, the Americans lost almost all the battles. They only won 2 during the whole war. And one of them was a minor battle. And then the last one was Yorktown. But up until then, they lost them all, largely because George Washington was a terrible tactical general. He's a great leader of men, but he kept getting flanked in every battle and he didn't ever learn from his mistakes. Sorry to say, I mean, that's just the truth. I don't think that's a dispute. So they lost all the battles, but they survived. And Washington did effectively retreat, bravely ran away, as brave Sir Robin did when he was confronted with the Black Knight or the Three Knights. So that's what they have to do. They have to survive, and so far they're doing it. And a lot of critics of the war say they're going to be able to do that indefinitely, or at least for a long time, that they have 20 years of stockpiling these missiles, that they haven't even fired their most sophisticated missiles, that their plan, according to many credentialed critics, including Colonel Douglas McGregor, including John Mearsheimer, including Alistair Crook. Now, all these people are smeared as being either pro-Iranian or just anti-Washington, D.C., as I am. And that's fine. And maybe they're wrong, or maybe they're exaggerating to the negative side because of that. But so far, the Strait's not open. Another day goes by, it's not open. And Trump is asking other countries to come help, and they're refusing to do so. So if this were something that was doable, if the Iranians could be forced to open the Strait, or the Strait could be forced open, the U.S. would have done it. I mean, come on, use your brain. No matter how badly you want to support Trump, it's ludicrous to think that if the U.S. could open the Strait, they still wouldn't do it because it's not our problem. And I want to talk about how economically retarded that argument is in a second. But the first thing is to face reality. The U.S. can't open the Strait, or they would do it. And England, France, Germany, the rest, it's not Trump derangement syndrome. They don't want to send their ships in to certain destruction. Regardless if the United States insured them and paid them back, they don't want to send their crews to certain death. And so far, the Strait's not open. So it's not open because it can't be opened. Face reality. And let's talk about this argument that it doesn't really matter to the U.S. because the oil that goes through the Strait of Hormuz is not really imported to the U.S. It's mostly imported to Europe and other countries, Asia. And as far as I can make out, I think that's mostly true. I think we get some oil from there, but it wouldn't be devastating to the U.S. in a vacuum if oil markets were the way that Trump, the economic moron, imagines they are. If that were reality, okay, but it's not. So let's just accept the fact that, okay, the U.S. doesn't import a lot of oil that goes through the Straits of Hormuz, but Europe does. Now you shut that off. Now that oil's not coming out. So two things happen. The world supply of oil is now lower, okay? And oil is traded on global markets. So if the world supply is lower, and I'll make the caveat, there are different kinds of oil, heavy, sour, light, sweet, crude, blah, 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 blah. All that makes a difference. But we'll just call it oil for the sake of argument, to keep it simple right now. If the world supply of oil goes down, then the price in general is going to go up. All right, that's nobody disputes that. And one of the ways it's going to go up for Americans is wherever they are buying oil. And again, it's not like you go on a global exchange and say, give me this type of oil that went through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, deliveries, how things get delivered after the transaction is made. Yeah, maybe, the oil from that goes through the Strait doesn't eventually get here, but it's traded on an exchange. And if the Europeans, who are reliant, do take a lot of delivery that originates or comes through the Strait of Hormuz, don't have that oil anymore, then they're going to compete with U.S. buyers for the oil that is available. and therefore bid up the price for Americans. I mean, this is not 4D chess. This is 2D checkers. Okay. So Trump's argument, he's making this argument because he doesn't know what to do. He's been confronted with the fact that his dumb move has resulted in the consequence that everyone predicted for decades, and he had no plan to deal with it. So now he's trying to make up this argument that, well, we don't even get that oil, so it's not our problem. I mean, number one, your allies, you just screwed them again, as you did badgering Russia into invading Ukraine and blowing up the Keystone pipeline, or the pipeline coming out of Russia between Russia and Europe. Okay. So you've screwed them twice now in 5 years, as far as their energy needs are concerned. And now you've screwed them again. But I mean, again, that doesn't even hold water. You're screwing America too. I mean, even to the extent that there were embargoes on Iranian oil. Again, that just raises the price for everybody. It lowers the world supply of oil, which is traded on world exchanges and is fungible within each type. Like all the light sweet crude in the world it's fungible. All of the heavy sour in the world, it's fungible. So it doesn't matter if it comes from Iran or where it comes from. When it gets to the exchange, it's traded like any other fungible good. So, just completely stupid. I knew Trump was an economic moron when I voted for him myself, partially, knowing that my vote wouldn't matter because I live in New York and he's never going to win New York, partially to protest yet another just terrible Libertarian Party candidate. And no, not because he was gay and not because of anything. I think his trans thing was relatively okay, his position there. But another apologist to the regime, another one sucking up to the regime during COVID. We need a strong libertarian to run for the libertarian nomination, or to win the libertarian nomination. And we've had too many left-wing regime apologists in there. And then once in a while, we get a bunch of right-wing, recycled moderate Republican like Gary Johnson, who's a nice guy, by the way. So anyway, I digress. I knew Trump was going to be terrible on economics. The whole tariff argument, a large part of MAGA is retarded. Let's face it. Let's just be frank here. The whole economic thing, the whole mercantilist tariff, rebuild manufacturing, which is not unbuilt. The manufacturing output is at all-time U.S. highs. Okay. That's not even true. The fact that they're doing it with a lot less jobs is like any other industry. So what we could really use right now is free-flowing cheap goods from China. That's what saved us after the financial crisis, when we doubled the money supply and didn't suffer from huge price inflation because consumer goods started coming from China while we started making higher value goods. So manufacturing did not go away. We're just manufacturing things we never could before because we were bogged down making, with people stitching together t-shirts, which is done in China now. Okay. But that wasn't at the cost of U.S. manufacturing. Okay. A lot of jobs went away because automation took over. That's what happened. And I've made that case before. It's in my book. It's the Fed Stupid. If you want to get that, go to itsthefedstupid.com. You'll sign up on my email list, get some additional free content to this podcast. And you also get that book for free. And while it focuses on the monetary system and the Federal Reserve, it does, since at the time that I was finishing it was during Trump's first term, right near the end, I believe. No, or maybe at the beginning of COVID, end of Trump's first term, President lockdown, where he again failed in the one big test of his first term, COVID. He completely caved into the regime. And when we needed somebody strong and anti-establishment, he locked down the country. He got behind the whole thing, pinned a medal on Fauci. Just awful, awful. And now the big test of his second term, he's completely failed as well, and even much worse getting into this war. So, the whole economic part of MAGA was always dumb, but the foreign policy part was not perfect. It was not great. It wasn't Ron Paul. Take 200,000 troops and march them home and discharge them from the army, or at least discharge that many. I mean, what we need in the army is to keep the real warriors and get rid of everybody who's there for the benefits or participating in a social program, and just keep the natural born killers. That's what we need. So we need a lot less people in the army to secure our borders. And of course, we have our nuclear capability. And with the Air Force, the submarines, the nukes, you don't need many ground troops. Ground troops are for invading countries. All right. And there should be no reason we ever have to do that again. Really wasn't any reason for us to do that in our history in the first place. But to secure the borders, you need some ground troops who could train the rest of us schleps in case, we ever needed a bigger army. But basically just to maintain the capability. But no, Trump has completely gone the opposite. He actually promised not to go to war with Iran. And here he is going to war with Iran, among just in general, not promising not to start any new wars. So, I did an article that I'll link to in my show notes page, why the Trump experiment failed to shrink government or keep the United States out of forever wars, as if those are the only bad ones. And it really comes down to worldview. I mean, we had some hopes that the MAGA view, the America First part of it, I guess, more than make America great again, because, and I'm going to do a separate podcast on this, the whole idea of greatness and what makes a country great is completely skewed. It almost always means something that makes it worse for the citizens. But we'll leave that to another day. America First, that sounds better. It just means that the politicians are supposed to consider the needs of their constituents first before the citizens of other countries. Now, to me, it should be America only, right? But at least first. But of course, this Iran war doesn't benefit Americans at all. Zero. Really doesn't benefit Israelis either. It benefits the Netanyahu administration, the little empire in Tel Aviv, just like the empire in DC. Yeah, they benefit, right? Their connected corporations benefit. We don't benefit from the empire run from DC, just like most Israelis don't benefit from the empire run from Tel Aviv. So, the making great again sounds like building the empire bigger, right? That doesn't help us. America First would help us. America Only would help us more. So Trump was always, he thinks Teddy Roosevelt was a great president, and so do a lot of his followers. So that should tell you everything. And now we know he thinks FDR was a great president. What more do you need to hear? Like, if you see the world the way I do, then FDR is the worst president in U.S. history. He destroyed what was left of the Constitution after Woodrow Wilson and the Republicans of that era, who started the progressive movement. But, Trump thinks he was great because he did big things. So his worldview just doesn't line up with anybody who wants limited government, free markets, non-interventionism. We don't want to pay for all these wars. At the very least, everybody has to pay for them. Not to mention, we get people killed, our own people in the other countries, civilians in the other countries. If it's an aggressive war, even the soldiers in the other countries are wrongful deaths. if it's not a war of defense. And of course, Tulsi Gabbard goes the way of, RFK Jr., right? So all these people who seemed better, and maybe there's some argument were marginally better than, let's say, the cabinet the first time around, which was just, might as well have been George W. Bush back again, right? Or his brother Jeb, right? So we thought we had, oh, well, look at this. These are all America firsters. And like Tulsi Gabbard had built all her credibility on being anti-war. But you notice when pressed, she always said we shouldn't do regime change wars, but we should battle that we can go to war with the terrorists to fight terrorism. So there was always a chink in her armor, right? As far as non-interventionism. If it could be justified as against terrorism, then it was okay. Rather than it can only be justified if a state of war exists, meaning the other country committed an act of war against the United States. That's the only way we went to war back when we used to declare them. Even after Pearl Harbor, FDR felt he had to ask permission from Congress. The worst president in history destroyed the Constitution, transferred the legislative power from Congress to the executive. That guy, even that guy, felt he had to ask Congress for permission to go to war after Pearl Harbor. And don't forget that when he made his speech asking for the declaration, the Japanese were still attacking the Americans on other islands, like Wake Island. It wasn't like they did one thing and went away. They were actively attacking Americans who, of course, were fighting back. But FDR still felt he needed a declaration of war to now initiate war, do more than just fire back at the Japanese who are shooting at us in the present. Okay? So Tulsi Gabbard never had the principles. So when she had the chance to fold, she did. Now, this Joe Kent guy who resigned seems like the honorable move, but of course the administration has pulled up stuff he posted in the past, completely supporting attacking Iran without a declaration of war. Okay? So, none of these people have the principles that were written into the Constitution. None of them do. RFK Jr., just another progressive. I think my prediction early on when he first got nominated has aged pretty well. All he's going to do is ban more things. Okay, the FDA is not a problem because it allows dangerous stuff. It does do that. The FDA is a problem because it bans alternatives, healthy or unhealthy. I mean, if you believe that every human being has an inalienable right to liberty, then you should be able to buy and sell anything you want, whether RFK Jr. or anyone else thinks it's safe or not. Okay? So the whole premise of the FDA is anti-American, it's anti-liberty, it's progressive, and he's just another progressive. And all he's done, and by the way, I read his entire book, so I know he has no principles close to any of ours at all. His explanation at the beginning of his book, the premise upon which the rest of the book is built, is that the regulatory agencies were noble experiments that were put in place for these noble ends and just got corrupted during the Reagan deregulation years. That's what he thinks is wrong. All right, so God, what good could come of the whole Make America Healthy thing? I've never been on board with. I can't believe so many libertarians are on board with it because there is that left-wing progressive instinct in them that like banning GMOs and those kinds of things. So, everybody's got their weakness, I guess. But so really, I mean, the Trump administration is falling apart everywhere. I can't see any good coming of it from here on in, other than Trump just says uncle and quits. And as I've said before, I don't care if he declares victory, says it was the greatest victory in the history of the United States. Just get out of there, man. Give the Iranians what they want because their demands won't be unreasonable. Lift the sanctions on them and, let them go on enriching uranium for energy and medical needs. I mean, really, they have as much a right to a nuclear weapon as anyone else. So even that whole line of thinking is invalid. So I don't think they want one, or at least they didn't want one when the guy we just killed was alive, because he issued his fatwa cadabra, or whatever they call those, saying that it's against Islam to have a nuclear weapon. And they were following that. I mean, they were starting to question it. Well, what if it's a matter of survival? So the fact that they were having that debate was not all show. These are religious fanatics after all, and they take those fatwas seriously. So now we've blown up the guy who issued it, and the new guy is somebody who's a lot more hardline. I'm reading some reports that his father was not really comfortable with him as a successor, his own son, because he was so much harder line. So it'll be the usual. I mean, anything that happens out of this war will make things worse, even by the empire's own standards. Like Iraq is run by Shiites friendly to Iran now, okay? And have been since the Iraq War. That was the result of the Iraq War. You put the Shiites in power and they got in bed with Iran, whom you said was countered by the Sunni Hussein. So it's a disaster, and now economic ignorance is making it worse. This whole, we don't get oil from the Strait. I don't want you to forget how stupid that is, how moronic that is. And, I've said before, these days I think about the Fermi paradox like all the time, every day. It goes through my head. And if you don't know what that is, that's the guy's name was Fermi. He was a scientist in the mid-20th century who posed the question, if the universe is as vast as it appears to be from our perspective, why have we not heard from other species, intelligent life out there? And then there's all these theories. The dark forest, they're all being quiet because the universe is hostile and the smart ones don't want the stronger species to know they're there. But one of them is that intelligent life is self-limiting. It gets to a certain point and destroys itself. And it's not just things like the Iran war and the risk of nuclear war. I mean, even the fact that we're doing all these things that are making populations plummet everywhere, not just in the United States. Like our species is on the way to extinction unless we start doing something different. It just makes me think of this every day. But again, I digress. I'll just remind you, I thank you for listening, and please do subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, and sign up on my email list. As I said, if you go to itsthefedstupid.com, you get a free book out of it. You get on my email list. That's just more free content in addition to my Substack, which is at least partially paid. Should sign up on the Substack too. You could at least read the free portions of the articles. If you become a paid member, that helps me to keep doing this, obviously, because it does cost money. And share this with a friend. I mean, if you're on my list, forward that email to a friend and let them in on what we have here. I'll see you next time on Tom Mullen Talks Freedom. Thanks for listening.
The war of ideas has only just begun. Arm yourself with the knowledge you need by heading to TomMullenTalksFreedom.com and subscribing to our email list. And remember, every revolution starts in the minds of the people.